That time again for the 10-minute war with our good friend, the voice of college football, and our scarlet and gray needle in the haystack, the one and only reasonable Buckeye fan, Mark Rogers. Good to have you back, brother. How are you?
Well, I'm going to keep that title for the time being, but I'm sure I'm going to say something in the next few weeks that's going to make you waver on that title at some point. We'll get there.
Or in the next 10 minutes, as the case may be.
In the next 10 minutes.
Indeed. All right, so I laid this out a few minutes ago. Now I want to get your take on it. I laid out 5 ways that I think we're going to see COVID-19 impact the upcoming college football season. And yes, I do believe we're going to have a season. I was looking at some of the comments from Urban Meyer and Kirk Herbstreit yesterday. I think watching the testing protocols in these pro sports leagues, MLS has a 0% testing rate right now. It's the latest round of NBA tests in their bubble, 0. It was 0.1 in Major League Baseball. I know these college coaches the ADs are saying, well, they're students. We're not going to put them in a bubble. I think at a lot of these places, they're already in a bubble, frankly. Okay. And I think that you're going to see them actually put in a bubble because there's just too much at stake, scholarship opportunities and everything else for students, hundreds of thousands of students across the country, that watching these other sports able to do this, I have a hard time believing college football is just going to impose a self-imposed bankruptcy on what could be $60 million of lost revenue for every Power 5 team. Let's start there as like a preamble. What are your thoughts on that, Mark?
Well, my thoughts are that if we're going with the bubble that's being proposed and has been enacted, and we're seeing it in play in the MLS and the NBA, it doesn't seem functional or likely and it's not likely, and it's not going to happen to that degree where everybody convenes on Indianapolis, 14 schools for that long, and makes it from the last week of August all the way to the first week of December, because they are student first, athlete second, regardless of maybe their individual aspirations. So that can't happen. But like you say, to pretend, especially at major football programs, that they are part of the student population in the way they conduct themselves and in the way they their social circles and so forth is not the case now. So they do operate in bubbles, and I just think they're going to take their regiment, and probably already have to a certain extent, of when they go on the road and move it to campus and just live in a community of sorts as a football team to safeguard against positive tests.
So let's look at, here are 5 ways, and I could come up with many more, but for the brevity of time, I decided to narrow it down to 5 ways that I think we're going to see COVID-19 impact the upcoming college football season. I'm going to unveil these and one by one and let you respond and react. You ready to go?
Oh, yeah.
All right, here's number 5. I think later this week, the Big Ten's going to unveil a 10-game conference-only schedule for each team as it promised, but I think it's going to completely scrap the schedules we've already had. I do not believe it's going to be the 9 games every team was already going to play and then just +1 from there. I think they're going to try to come up with as many clever ways. And maybe it won't be quite what the ACC is doing with its regional podding system and stuff like that, but I think they're going to try to cut down on as many travel issues as they possibly can. So I think you're looking at an entirely different 10-game schedule. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I originally thought, okay, they've already got a 9-game season. All they have to do is tack on an attractive, or whatever the goal is, tack on another game for each team. But like you, I think they are going to completely scrap it. All my sources that I have in Big Ten circles say it's going to be a completely different schedule. Obviously, we're going to prioritize and keep in check the division format and the division games. My thought process involving any conference scheduling is fair and balanced scheduling, meaning every year when the Big Ten schedule is unveiled, I'm looking at East and West, and I'm looking at all the various teams and who do you play in the other division. And I would like to see a balanced composite record from those teams come close to a 500 record from the previous season, but that never comes into play. And so you see teams, let's say in the Eastern Division, play 3 teams from the West that went 9-27 the previous season in the Big Ten, and other teams having to play 3 teams that went 27-9 the previous season. That's my approach to the scheduling, and I would like to see fair and balanced scheduling to produce a truer schedule to produce a champion. It's a wild card year. Those initiatives and those priorities have to be thrown out the door. Let's have a functional schedule. And I think actually that's going to be the priority, is the functionality of the schedule. and trying to build in as much flexibility as possible and not being so locked into even the travel. I think that's going to be a priority, but I think the functionality and providing and building in as much flexibility is going to be the priority there. I would like to see the home and home concept come into play here, where we play the old Oak and Bucket game between Indiana and Purdue, and then we've got 2 6-team divisions where we can square off the one-on-one matchups of Illinois Northwestern, Ohio State, Michigan, and on down the line, and play a home and home series. Or you can go, are we going to go the level of best attractive games that are going to bring attraction to the conference and also fill up the coffers that have been drained by these non-conference games being canceled?
All right, the next way I think we could see COVID-19 impact the 2020 college football season is I think the season is going to start relatively on time, meaning I think we could see the season maybe start a week earlier in late August, taking advantage of as much warm weather as we can. I think you could see it delayed for a few weeks, like what they're doing with 6A and 5A Texas high school football, just to give them another few weeks to make sure their protocols are in place. But I think overall, it'll start relatively on time. But as we've already discussed, I think during the season, schools and conferences that aren't already doing so are going to put their players in a version of the bubble currently being successfully used by pro sports, despite the current vows not to do that. That doesn't mean they align together in some centralized location, but at most of these schools, particularly the further south of the Big Ten you go, Mark, if you know what I'm saying, okay, these guys really aren't a part of the student body. They largely live at the football building. They take online classes when they take classes. All right, and so I think you're going to see pretty much everybody that plays college football this fall adopt this kind of a model, because even the schools that are open, you're going to see a lot of distance learning on campus. You're going to see certain days where, hey, you can attend classes, mask up, attend classes on a couple days a week. The other 3 days, you're in your dorm room, you're at your apartment, wherever you're at on campus doing distance learning, right? You're going to see all these mitigation policies implemented by these schools that open up their campuses anyway. And I think these football programs are going to say, well, if we're doing that anyway, and it's already not the normal on-campus experience, then, why don't we just continue with the momentum we have coming out of camp that's going on right now, and Friday is when you can open up working with the coaches right across the country. Why not just continue those protocols and momentum right now that are keeping all these test rates low, and we'll just ride this thing through the whole season? I think you're going to see that.
So I can't argue with most of that, Steve. I do think that much of that is going to be the strong suggestion, like the voluntary workouts.
Yeah.
It's going to be, these are the guidelines that we put in play, and maybe a lot of that is going to be kept, as much as possibly can be kept from the public to consume those rules and regulations, or that strong suggestion of the way we're going to conduct ourselves through the football season. But this is the way we're going to do it, and everybody needs to come along with the way this is going to be conducted for us to have a football team that's going to stay healthy and do all the right things and play games on the field. But I don't know how much we're going to be privy to those rules and regulations.
And frankly, how much we need to be, by the way, right?
Sure.
That's kind of one of those things, we get privy to them if they don't work. Then suddenly we're all really privy to them, if you know what I'm saying. All right. Let's go to my next way I think we could see COVID-19 impact the 2020 college football season. Let's go back to the Big Ten's revamped 2020 schedule. I think the Michigan-Ohio State game is going to be played in the first 4 weeks of the season, and I wouldn't be shocked if it's the opening game of the season, Mark.
So this is where I'd like to go back to my home and home concept for the rivalry games, because we want to see the game played. Or maybe you and some of your Michigan fans don't want to see the game played.
I'd be fine if it's not played. I'm on record as saying that. Yeah.
I've heard that from you a few times. But the rest of us want to see the game intact and played. Well, my home and home concept kind of preserves that, or at least protects it as much as you possibly can. If you schedule one of the two games in September and then keep the traditional matchup sometime in late November, maybe you give it a bit of a buffer in the scheduling process to be able to play it a week later or a week earlier if needed, but give it that buffer in November to keep it at a traditional place as much as possible. The Big Ten, I think, more than any other Power 5 conference, is tied to tradition and tries to hold on to traditions as much as possible. And many of them I think are meaningful, and some of them are a bit silly. But they do break down, and they have been breaking down throughout the years. And I think the Friday night scheduling of games has been maybe one of the latest that the Big Ten has conceded to the TV schedule. But I would like to see this game played twice. Therefore, if you have an issue in late November and the traditional matchup can't be played, you already have a game in the bank in September.
I like that idea too. Yeah.
Or vice versa. Or if they both get played, hey, we're sitting here in 15 and 20 years from now, looking back on 2020 and what a horrible year it was, except we had a home-and-home Ohio State-Michigan series for the first time, probably the last time ever.
See, I kind of think overall, brother, I love what the NFL draft did. It embraced the abnormality. It embraced the uniqueness. It gave you perspectives and things you've never been able to see before. I think it would be wise to do that with this. The Major League Baseball is doing it. No DH in the National League, stuff like that. Okay, let's go ahead and embrace it. Let's own it. And that way, you're right, 10, 15, 20 years from now, we look back on this time and remember it as, you know what, I kind of have some fond memories. I don't want to go through that ever again, but there was some interesting, unique experiences. We tried some stuff that we would normally not try before. I like the home and home idea, by the way. I know this sounds nuts. I'd actually rather play Ohio State twice than once. If it was up to me, we either play them, don't play them at all, or do a home and home, something different, something unique, and something that makes us feel like, you know what, the season's not just difficult, but it's special at the exact same time, right? That's kind of what I hear you saying.
I'm with you.
All
Definitely.
Right. The fourth way that I think we could see coronavirus change what we're used to in college football this year, I think that starting the season is going to be more difficult than keeping it going. I think if they start the season, they will finish it. I think we've seen this pattern in Major League Baseball where about a week into spring training, it didn't look like there was any way they're going to make it. I mean, you've got arguably the best player in the game talking about, my wife's pregnant, I got to wear a mask, I'm not sure it's safe to play. David Price and a few other guys are sitting out. Are we even going to make it here? Are we going to get through it? The same thing with the NBA players. Hey, this is like we're staying at a Red Roof Inn. Look at this terrible food. And guys are opting out because of injuries and aren't going to play. NFL had this issue with the hashtag earlier this week with the players, and I agree with the players personally, which is there's no point. First of all, why play preseason games are stupid anyway. But secondly, college football doesn't have any preseason games, and we do it just fine, right? But secondly, this year, why have games that don't count, risking infection from a bunch of players who won't even be on your rosters? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever, right? And so the players you saw with training camp scheduled to start in a week from now in the NFL, hey, with their hashtag, we don't like your testing protocols. It seems to me the pattern is that getting going is where the controversy is, because it's new, you're blazing a trail, that's where all the worries and everything are. And then once you actually get into the process of managing this, and your protocols, that seems to be like there was all this controversy at the start of spring training, and then like the whole rest of spring training went by in 5 minutes, and you're like, oh crap, the season starts in 2 days, right? And that seems to be the pattern here, and I think that will be the pattern with college football. The debate will be, what is the starting date? And then once the starting date begins, I think then the season will finish from there.
So if I'm reading you and I'm reading what I think the situation should be to play out, I am no medical expert, so I don't have a strong pushback on this in any way. And if anything, I agree with it, because why not have the flexibility built within the season? So I would, if anything, start the season as soon as possible, maybe a week 0, August 29th start.
As would I.
For the Big Ten.
Yep.
Then you incorporate more flexibility.
I agree.
Within the calendar.
Well, first of all, I think that's when the season should start anyway, any year. So every team gets 2 bye weeks. That helps with the health of the body. That helps with academics. You also how about having some weeks where these group of 5 programs and stuff like that take center stage? And there's just so much more flexibility if you start the season in that week 0, that last week of August, when most of these guys are used to starting seasons then anyway. That's when high school football starts. I've always been in favor of that anyway, Mark.
Get the season going, and if we need to adjust, we'll have more time to adjust. Seems reasonable to me. The initial push was, well, the season's going to get pushed back. We need to push it back because the testing is going to be so much better and the results of the tests are going to be so much better. Well, as we see this play out, that's not necessarily the case. And there's a lot of skewing of the numbers, and we could get into that. But the numbers aren't necessarily again, I think the situation's getting better. Not necessarily the numbers are reflecting that. So if we're waiting for the numbers to get better by pushing back a season 1 or 2 weeks, that's not going to happen.
Final way I'm predicting COVID-19 is going to impact the season is I think this is where we're going to end it in ways we're used to. I think you're still at the end of the year going to see the 2 division winners play for the Big Ten title in Indianapolis after the regular season. I still think it's going to end. I think it's going to look a lot different leading up to it and during it than we've ever seen before, or at least since World War II, when you had guys coming and going for the military and teams like Iowa pre-flight #1 in the country and stuff like that. And almost nobody watching right now was alive back then or remembers what that was like. So I think before and during, it's going to look a lot different than what we're accustomed to. But then I think at the end, it's going to end in ways we're traditionally used to.
Your logic is pretty strong there, Steve, for a Michigan guy. Because when you really look at it, there would have to be a catastrophic situation in one of the 2 divisions to create a situation in which I would think you would need to tear it up. Because even if 2 teams were eliminated out of one division, I still, depending, to be reasonable about it, depending on which programs we're talking about, but if we're just looking at the math, I still think it's a division format in which you play the 2 champions regardless. I can't see anything playing out. And if it gets to that point, we probably have bigger issues involving just getting teams on the field to play meaningful games that can determine a champion in any way than playing the format in which we originally have it. Yeah, I completely see that. I think you outlined it perfectly in regards to it could be looking so much different through the course of the season, but the result should be Indianapolis, 2 teams that represent the East and the West playing for a championship. That
all being said, though, and if they wanted to use this year as the excuse to do it, I'm all for it as well. I think you eliminate divisions. I'm a big proponent of it. I love what the Big 12 does, which is commissioned by a longtime former Big Ten athletic director, by the way, Bob Bowlesby. Just take the top 2 teams, come up with as much of a balanced schedule as you can, and try, instead of trying to competitively and geographically, position divisions, just, you have some rivalries that are protected. You mentioned the Old Oaken Bucket, the Axe, between Minnesota, Wisconsin, the game, of course. You have some of those. And then after that, it's just at the end of the year, the top 2 teams go to Indianapolis to play for the championship. I'd get rid of the divisions.
So for me, Steve, the Big 12 does it right because it's the purest championship because everybody played everyone. But they fell into that conclusion. That wasn't their brainchild. They had, of course, schools leave the conference, and then they fell into that scenario.
So, Mark, before we let you go, is there anything else you have heard through the grapevine and through your sources or talking to other college football reporters on your YouTube channel over the last few days that we didn't bring up or talk about as it relates to the season and COVID-19 that you think we ought to discuss here?
I would like to say that there is, just to bring some value to your show here, Steve, but I just got off the line with a reporter from Bucknuts, 247 Sports. They pretty much lined it up the way we're discussing it right here, of all the possibilities, but the probabilities that they're going to tear it up, and that the functionality of the schedule and the flexibility is going to rule this, according to the way they see it.
Define functionality.
Functionality meaning that
in this instance,
if you eliminate Team A, that you can see, okay, well, then we can adjust accordingly this way, or that way. Okay, let's eliminate Team B. What are we going to do?
Right.
Let's eliminate this week and that week. How many different openings and opportunities have we provided ourselves to fall back on?
Always great stuff, Mark. Thanks for joining us here again in the 10-Minute War. We'll see you next time. All right, take care.
Thanks a lot, Steve.